This is the production possibilities frontier of Venezuela. So we've drawn it already for Canada. Now I have it for Venezuela, and we can see the different combinations possible for Venezuela and the opportunity cost. So we've seen what absolute advantage is. What about comparative advantage? Now, comparative advantage is used to determine who produces what if we can trade between countries. And comparative advantage links back again to opportunity cost. If we have to produce oil and lumber, for example, and we can choose between who produces what, who would produce what? Well, usually we're going to look at the opportunity cost to determine who should be giving up what. Well, in Venezuela, we know that the opportunity cost of 1 barrel of oil is a half ton of lumber. The opportunity cost of 1 barrel of oil in Canada is 2 tons of lumber. If we have Canada specialize in oil, for every barrel of oil they produce, they give up 2 tons of lumber. And Venezuela only gives up a half a ton of lumber. What about lumber? Canada, every time they produce 1 ton of lumber, they give up a half a barrel of oil. Whereas in Venezuela, 1 ton of lumber, they give up 2 barrels of oil. So Canada, in this case, would, if we could choose, where are we going to, who's going to produce what? Well, Canada's giving up less oil to produce 1 ton of lumber, so let's have them produce lumber. And Venezuela is giving up less lumber to produce oil. So let's have Venezuela be an oil-producing nation. And that's exactly what happens. We look at the opportunity cost to determine who should specialize in what in international trade. Lastly, this diagram basically is showing us that through international trade, we can actually get to points outside of the production possibility frontier. We can start within the frontier, and if we specialize, we can actually achieve these 2 points here. Here we've got Venezuela producing oil. Suppose they say, hey, you know what? Venezuela, we're going to be producing down here. So Venezuela can be an oil-producing nation, and they just produce oil, and they're down here in production. And Canada is producing just lumber, and they produce 2,000. And what they can do is they can now start trading. Venezuela can trade, let's say, 1,000 barrels of oil to Canada in exchange for 1,000 tons of lumber. Well, what happens? We give up 1,000 barrels of oil. We're in Venezuela. But in exchange, we get 1,000 tons of lumber. And we find ourselves at this point. Canada is the same. We're producing only lumber. We give up 1,000, so we come down to here. But in exchange, we get 1,000 units of oil. And so, thanks to international exchange, we find ourselves at a point beyond our frontier. We can actually go beyond where we were before. And this is why international trade is so important. So lastly, the frontier we saw was a very linear line. It was a line, it was straight in the example we provided before. In reality, production frontiers are curved, as you see here. They don't have a straight line, they're more curved. Oops. So why are production possibilities frontiers not linear? Why do we see typically, if we were to actually analyze the data, why does it curve like this? Well, it's pretty basic. Imagine we're at point A up here, and we're in an economy where we have our workers, and they can either work in the healthcare sector or be teachers. So we have people, and we tell the people, hey, you know what? We want you all to work in the healthcare sector. And in reality, people have knowledge and specializations in the economy, and some people may be better at being doctors, and some people may be better at being teachers. So if we were to move from, if we say, well, we have everybody working as doctors now, but you know what, we'd like some education. So we're going to move to point B. to get to point B, if I have all these people that are healthcare workers, who am I going to use to teach as I move to point B? As I say, well, we're going to add some education into our production in the economy. Well, I'm going to use the people that are bad at healthcare and really good at teaching. And so I'm going to give up some healthcare, but I'm taking away the people that were really bad at healthcare. So I'm going to take away a little bit, probably, of healthcare, but I'm going to get a lot of education because I'm taking away the people that were really, really good potential teachers. And I expand a little bit more, and I can go to point C. I'll take away some more healthcare workers, and I get a nice big amount of education. Let's say I'm all the way down at point D. I'm at point D, and I'm producing a whole bunch of education and just a little bit of healthcare. If I want to improve and expand education just to point F, I've got these people over here that are being healthcare workers. Well, these are probably the best healthcare workers, and they're probably really bad at education. But if I use them to produce education, I'm going to give up a lot of healthcare, and I'm going to get a little education. Okay? And so we have this law of diminishing returns because I'm using factors of production that are not as efficient. Here I'm going to use very efficient teachers. I give up a little bit of healthcare. I get a lot of education. But as I continue and continue and continue, at some point, I'm going to get a little bit more education, I have to use up a lot of healthcare workers because I'm taking from the best people. Okay? And the assessment we did on comparative advantage also holds true if the PPF, the production possibility frontier, is curved. So here we have an example of Brazil and the United States. These are the production possibilities frontiers for Brazil and the United States in the production of wheat and sugar. And let's just ask the question, who should be producing sugarcane and who should be producing wheat if we were to do international trade? Well, first question, who gives up less wheat to produce more sugarcane? Well, if we take a current point, and we're currently at this point here, and we want to move up and produce more sugarcane, move from this point to this point, we can see that in Brazil they give up just a little bit of wheat. They move from, let's see if I can get my pen in here. If I move from this point to this point, I increase the amount of sugarcane by that amount, and I give up a little bit of wheat. In the United States, to increase that amount, to move from this point to this point, I increase by the same amount of sugarcane as was the case here in Brazil, but I give up a lot of wheat to do it. So the country that gives up the least to produce more sugar, well, it's pretty basic. It's Brazil. They give up a little bit. That's how much we get. To get the same amount over here, I have to give up a lot of wheat. So Brazil has a comparative advantage in the production of sugar. What if we looked at it from the production of wheat? Same thing. Here I want to expand wheat by a fixed amount. So I'm going to grow wheat by this amount and it's the same amount here, right? I'm going to move from this point to this point. I give up that much sugar to do that. If I tell the Brazilian workers, stop producing sugar and produce wheat, I can go to the U.S. economy and produce the same amount of wheat, but I just give up a little bit of sugar to do that as I move from this point to this point. And so the comparative advantage here in the United States would be in the production of wheat. So typically in analysis in this case, the United States would produce wheat and Brazil would produce sugar. And to finish things off, remember what I told you before is that economists approach all of these issues about marginal decision making, about costs, about production, about unemployment, all of it from a positive position. Economists do not get into issues about what should happen. Economics is factual based. We rarely will look at normative analysis when we study economic issues. Okay, so that's it. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.